Law codes carved in stone have an inherent expiration date. The chisel stops, the text becomes permanent, but human civilization never stops moving. As a society invents new technologies, builds different types of cities, and develops complex economies, it inevitably collides with scenarios its original legal founders could never have imagined. If a legal system insists on reading its founding documents purely historically, freezing the text in the exact context it was written, it faces two distinct outcomes. It either shatters into competing schisms over literal interpretations, or it becomes obsolete. The architects of Jewish law bypassed this trap entirely. They did not engineer the Torah to be read as a static historical artifact, but as a dynamic constitutional framework. To make that framework operate, they identified a specific legal concept, din Mufla. This translates roughly to an ambiguous or mysterious law. It occurs when a biblical command is stated without any operational clarity. When the text is vague, it isn't an error or a missing page. That ambiguity is a deliberate architectural feature, designed specifically to force human beings to step in and resolve it. Take the biblical injunction to remember the Sabbath day and sanctify it. The text offers absolutely zero procedural instructions on how to actually execute that command. It is entirely open-ended. To resolve open loops and bind the nation to a single standard, the system relied on an exclusive, centralized institution, the Sanhedrin, or Supreme Court. This court was not populated by kings or mystics. It was a peer-driven forum made up of the nation's sharpest legal scholars and intellectuals. This logic flowchart demonstrates the constitutional toolbox the judges used, the 13 Midot, strict hermeneutical principles for interpreting ambiguous text. These pathways act as severe procedural constraints. Judges must route the text to one of these specific logical rules, generating a single, structurally sound conclusion. This created a shared, rigorous legal language. If another judge wants to challenge a proposed ruling, they must construct their counterproof using these exact same 13 tools. The Sanhedrin and the Midot form an engine of jurisprudence. They take vague ancient poetry and process it into precise, actionable legislation. Inside the Sanhedrin, proposed legislation endured intense open peer review. Judges debated in a plenary session where every opinion was tested against the collective intellect of the room. The absolute rule of engagement was logic. Every argument presented had to rely exclusively on one of the 13 Midot to construct a textual proof against a peer's claim. This strict adherence to logic produced a radical rule for an ancient religion. Prophecy, miracles, and divine intervention were explicitly barred from the legislative process. Even if a thoroughly authenticated prophet walked into the court and claimed God directly instructed them on how to define an ambiguous law, the judges were legally mandated to ignore them. When the scholars inevitably reached a stalemate, they did not wait for a sign from above. They resolved the issue through a binding, transparent majority vote. By severing the legal code from mystical authority, the system ensured that the law was determined entirely by objective human rationality and national consensus. To understand how this court operated, we have to look at their epistemology, specifically the difference between descriptive and prescriptive law. When analyzing a verse, the court was not engaging in descriptive analysis. They were not acting as historians or linguists, trying to uncover exactly what a text literally meant to a nomadic tribe in the Bronze Age. Reconstructed historical reality offers very little help when trying to solve modern crises. A purely descriptive reading leaves the law stuck in the past. Instead, the court exercised prescriptive legislation. They held the exclusive constitutional authority to prescribe how the text must function legally from that moment forward. These dense marginal annotations demonstrate this prescriptive power. Rulings were engineered to manage the socioeconomic pressures, urban developments, and moral requirements of the current generation. By reading the text prescriptively rather than descriptively, the court transformed a static historical document into a highly responsive tool for maintaining social order. We can see this prescriptive mechanism clearly in the evolution of kiddushin, the laws governing marriage acquisition. The original biblical baseline for acquiring a wife was straightforward. A man and a woman established a marriage exclusively through physical consummation. In a highly visible, decentralized, nomadic desert camp, this informal mechanism worked adequately. The community was small, tight-knit, and everyone knew everyone else's status. As the civilization grew and people migrated into dense, anonymous cities, the old law created severe vulnerabilities. Men became highly mobile, traveling for trade, leaving women exposed to untraceable abandonment without formal proof of their union. To solve this crisis, the court utilized their hermeneutical toolbox. This text mapping diagram illustrates their logic. They legally linked the word for taking a wife in the Book of Deuteronomy directly to the exact same word used for taking the field of Ephron in Genesis. The court executed a deliberate legal maneuver, using the authorized 13 Midot to force a textual connection. As a result of this linkage, the legal mechanism of marriage shifted entirely. It moved away from physical consummation and became a formalized, documented financial contract, requiring an exchange of value. The court did not illegally rewrite the biblical text. They utilized their constitutional authority to prescribe a new, binding definition of it, protecting the vulnerable in a radically changed society. Because a prescriptive ruling is engineered to solve a specific generation's socio-political needs, it carries a logical consequence. It is not permanent. This introduces the constitutional principle of generational sovereignty. A later Supreme Court is not rigidly bound to the precedents set by its predecessors regarding an ambiguous text. A newly constituted court can pick up the exact same 13 Midot, apply them to the exact same verse, argue a completely different logic, and derive a brand new ruling. Stability is maintained because the override follows the established constitutional process. The community accepts the new ruling based on the court's recognized authority to address the specific socio-political requirements of the current generation. Overturning precedent requires immense intellectual discipline. The new court must still prove its case through the exact same authorized hermeneutical channels, preventing arbitrary or reckless changes to the law. The ultimate strength of this framework is its built-in mechanism for legal obsolescence and renewal. It explicitly prevents any single historical era from dictating the reality of the future. The architecture of Din Mufla relies on a finite, ancient text that is continuously activated and expanded by disciplined human intellect. When fundamentalists treat a text as purely literal, they turn it into a brittle artifact. Eventually, that artifact shatters against the complex realities of modernity. The Jewish legal tradition survived millennia of global exile, specifically because it avoided that rigidity. It was engineered as a portable system, capable of adapting its laws to any geography or era without losing its constitutional core. This mechanism of rational, prescriptive agency anchors the text's survival across centuries. By explicitly barring prophecy and entrusting the interpretation of the law entirely to human logic and majority rule, the original architects guaranteed its survival. Continuous human intervention sustains the law as a current, living constitution.